Every once in a while, I will go on the internet and I will look for quotes that I find motivating, or that I can find motivating, or that I can use to motivate other people, or that I can use to come up with a idea that I can present to you and to others that might just create a spark, that might just be the spark that gets them going on a path to living a better life. Before I tell you the quote, I just want to tell you about my feeling of no coincidences, okay? Not no coincidences, because certainly some things are simply a coincidence, but I believe that very often things happen for a reason, or there are events that occur that we can't explain why we were put in a certain space or a certain place at a certain time, but somehow it seems to lead us. It seems to be a point along our path that we were supposed to somehow reach. So I saw this quote, and I'm going to share the quote with you in a few minutes, but it's by a man named Eric Thomas, and I didn't know who this was, okay? So I looked him up and I went to his website, and the name of his website is Breathe University, BU, Breathe University, founded in 2013. And Eric Thomas is somebody that used to be homeless, okay? Let me tell you a little bit about Eric Thomas, okay? So Eric Thomas, PhD, is a critically acclaimed author, world-renowned speaker, educator, pastor, and Audible.com Audi Awards finalist. E.T., as he is better known, has taken the world by storm with his creative style and high energy messages. Okay, here's the quote. When you want to succeed as much as you want to breathe, then you will be successful. And the point being, because Eric Thomas is not just a personal coach, but he's a business coach. And the point is that breathing is essential to us. And everybody wants to breathe, okay? And the idea is that you have to want it so badly, that you have to want it as much as you want to breathe or need to breathe. And it got me to thinking, well, what does it mean? Or what is the significance of this? And how can we put this into perspective when the greatest challenge that you have when you have a respiratory disease or condition, or a cardiovascular disease or condition, and shortness of breath is your greatest challenge. So you say, when you want to succeed as much as you want to breathe, then you'll be successful. But here's my question to you. What were you doing before COPD? What were you doing before pulmonary fibrosis? And what were you doing before your diagnosis of pulmonary hypertension? Because I find that very often people can find reasons why they're not doing something and come up with explanations. And I hate to use the word excuses, but I'll say more so explanations as to why they are not doing something at this present moment. So why aren't you doing this? Well, it's because blah, blah, blah. Okay, why aren't you doing that? Well, this happened and that happened and the other thing happened. So what I would ask you is, what would you be doing without COPD? What would you be doing without pulmonary fibrosis? And what would you be doing without pulmonary hypertension? And I think that in asking yourself those questions, okay, and I'm not saying that, I mean, I think it's a fascinating question. I'm not saying it to point fingers or to criticize or to put anybody on the spot. I ask that question because I think it's really interesting. So you say, okay, if all of a sudden right now you were no longer to have COPD, what would you do? If all of a sudden one day a cure was found and you no longer had pulmonary hypertension or you no longer had pulmonary fibrosis, what would you do? okay? And I think that I have to ask you also, so what were you doing before COPD? What were you doing before pulmonary fibrosis, and what were you doing before pulmonary hypertension? They say that a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. And another way that you could say that is so-and-so has a problem for every solution, right? And again, this goes back to, who are you? Who were you then? Who are you now? Who do you hope to be in the future? I hear stories about people who used to be this, that, and the other thing until they got COPD, or until they got pulmonary fibrosis, or until they got pulmonary hypertension or diagnosed with such. And then I hear reverse stories about people who were doing okay, you know, what have you, but then they were diagnosed with a chronic illness or a potentially life-threatening illness, and that kind of motivated them to raise the bar. That motivated them to excel. That motivated them to pick up the pace in order to accomplish the things that they want in life, or in order to accomplish the things that they feel is their mission in life. So I know a few such people right off the top of my head who, once diagnosed with a chronic illness, said, you know what, I want to educate as many people as possible about this illness, or I want to make sure that no one goes through the suffering that I do. So again, I ask you, who are you now? Who were you then? And if the person you are now is different than the person you are then, ask yourself, what were the steps that led you from there to here? And some of them may be positive steps, some of them may be negative steps. But then we have to examine what of those are physiologic. In other words, what of those are actually the disease making us do these things or making us adapt in this way? And which of them are emotional or behavioral decisions that upon receiving this news that we have a chronic illness, we've now decided to do A, B, and C. And if you can decide to do A, B, and C, you can make a decision not to do A, B, and C, or you can make a decision to do D, E, F, G, H, I, 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. You get what I'm saying? Very often I will meet with people who are much more short of breath than they used to be, and they can't explain why. And when we look at their pulmonary function test from a year ago and we look at their pulmonary function test today, they're exactly the same. And this leads me over and over to say that this proves that there have to be other things involved in breathing and involved in shortness of breath other than just the respiratory system and other than just pulmonary function. And that's why I ask, what are the steps that it took to get you from point A to point B? And what are the steps we need to take to get from point B being where we are right now, just B, right? Just B. Just made that up. But point B to point C. So again, where were you? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? We can't do much about where we were. Where we are now, we can start to make changes. And certainly where we want to be in the future, we can make changes. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a guaranteed success. That does not mean that if you take your medications properly, if you exercise, if you eat right, if you manage your stress, and if you do what you can to prevent infection, that does not guarantee success. Let me be 100% real about that. That does not guarantee that your disease will not progress. That does not guarantee that you will live a long time. However, it stacks the odds in your favor, okay? And if you think about it, whether you have COPD or not, or whether you have pulmonary fibrosis or pulmonary hypertension or not, we all need a little bit of help once in a while. We all need a little bit of luck. We all would like the odds stacked in our favor, right? And again, that's why it's important to say, well, what is real here? What is the COPD? What is my response to the COPD? and what is occurring in response to my response to the COPD or pulmonary fibrosis or pulmonary hypertension, okay? They say that life is 10% what happens to us and 90% how we respond to it. So let me just give you an example of something negative that proves the point that I just said. So you're diagnosed with COPD, you become depressed about your diagnosis, or you become shocked at your diagnosis, and then you stop exercising because you've been diagnosed with COPD, and now your body is going to adapt not so much to your COPD, but to the lack of exercise. Here's a positive. You got diagnosed with COPD, you realize that, hey, you're not exercising enough, and therefore your body responds to that new exercise regimen, and now you're actually fitter than you were before because you weren't exercising before, but even with COPD, you're now exercising, okay? So again, I have not really touched on this quote before. Life is 10% what happens to us and 90% what we do in response, okay? Let me just... Life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. So again, the people that are here and hearing this right now, I know I'm preaching to the choir because you have all made a decision. You've all made a decision to act and to react. And whatever you're reacting in response to, or whatever you're reacting to, you have chosen to make positive lifestyle change. Okay, and I commend you for that. And as we are now in the throes of the 5th week, I say, stay the course. Stay the course. Stick with it, okay? Because things are going well. They're working, okay? And if they're not exactly working for you right now, that's okay. This may not be your exact moment, okay? But stick with it anyway. If you can't do 20 minutes, do 10 minutes. If you can't do 10 minutes, do 5 minutes. If you can't do 5 minutes, do 3 minutes, okay? But stick with it. Keep doing something, okay? Nike says just do it. I say just do something, just do anything. Keep moving forward. Every moment that we are stopped and waiting for something to happen, we are losing ground, okay? So the time for waiting is over, as you know, because none of you are waiting at this point, okay? But the key is keep in mind that everybody struggles. Everybody has hardships. Everybody is tested in different ways, okay? Trust me, I've had my share of tests, and I have my share of tests on a regular basis, okay? But for me personally, I have to decide every day that in spite of these challenges, I am still going to keep moving forward. In spite of these challenges, I will keep trying. I will keep striving. I am not going to let these challenges take me away from my destiny, away from the things that I am supposed to be doing. And that is all I ask of you, is that you actualize and you visualize and you think about who you are and who you were meant to be and who you were. And look at those 3 people. It could be goofy who you were, goofy who you are, and goofy who you're meant to be. The goofy you're meant to be. The goofy you were, the goofy you are, the goofy you're meant to be. And for those of you that don't know, the reason I'm using goofy is because I always use angel goofy and devil goofy as examples of what you should and shouldn't do. But it's like the goofy you are, the goofy you were, the goofy you are, and the goofy you're meant to be. And let's reconcile those 3 goofies, okay? Let's reconcile those, and let's make sure that we are not losing sight of the goofy we're supposed to be, or the Pluto, or the Minnie, or the Mickey, or the Donald, or the Daisy. But the idea is, do not let your disease dictate who you are as a human being, because it does not, okay? You are not your disease. And I say this over and over and over again. You are not COPD. You are not pulmonary fibrosis. You are not pulmonary hypertension. You are not any of these other conditions that can sometimes make it feel like you are. That can sometimes make it feel like there is no other part of you outside of those conditions, because your whole life has become about going to the doctor and picking up your medicines at the pharmacy and coming home and taking your medicines and then and then getting up and doing it again. But that is why over and over and over again I ask you who you are. I ask you to remember the things that make you uniquely you. And maybe it's one thing that defines you. Maybe it's two things. Maybe it's three things. I'd say it's a maximum of 5 things, okay? Because after that, it's not really definitive, okay? It's not really defining. But I would say dig down, ask yourself, and write these things in your journal or write them someplace where you could put them up on your refrigerator and say, I am a mother, I am a sister, I am a teacher, or I am a father, I am a chef, and a writer, whatever it is, because it's going to be different for every person, okay? But my point is, do not let your disease determine who you are as a human being. And so often people become these sort of monochromatic, unifocal versions of themselves, and they let all of the beauty drop out. And I'm not talking about physical beauty. I'm talking about they lose their penchant for art and for music and for color and for fashion and for style and for fun and for jokes and for smiling. But I'm saying, do not let that go. Do not give up that fight. Do not let go of that rope or that hand. Fight that power with all that you are, because that is who you are, and that is the fight that will define you. So one more time, okay, I'm going to go back to Eric Thomas, and I'm going to say, when you want to succeed as much as you want to breathe, then you'll be successful. I want you to think back to when you first graduated from school. Or if you didn't go to school, when you first decided, you know what, I'm going to become a lawyer, or I'm going to become a doctor, or I'm going to be the biggest butcher in town, or I am going to but think of all these things. And I'm going to say, I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to say, when you want to breathe as much as you want to succeed, or as much as you wanted to succeed in your peak, at your peak, in your heyday, when you are full of piss and vinegar, right? When you want to breathe as much as you want or wanted to succeed, then you will breathe. What do you think of that? That's something. Think about it. Have a good day, everybody. This is your day. You. It ain't COPD's day. It ain't PF's day. And it ain't PH's day. This day is YOU. Go out and spend that day, okay? The way that YOU want to spend this day. Being YOU. The notorious YOU. Have a great one, my friends.